Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. And this week I'm back at Longmeadow after the trip to Malvern. I brought back with me from Malvern lots of ideas, inspiration and plants to put in the garden. But above all, the realisation that what matters most at this time of year is to spend as much time out in the garden as possible. This week I'll be planting out my tomato plants into the greenhouse, as well as preparing containers for summer colour and scent. Carol offers some planting solutions for a problem pergola.
It's very grand, isn't it?
It is really, yes.
Yeah.
And Joe visits a contemporary garden, full of inspiring design ideas.
There's nothing better than visiting a garden when it's at its peak.
It's time to plant out my tomatoes, but before I can plant them, I've learnt over the years that it is worth making a really good support structure for them. I used to just put in canes like this, but however hard you try and get the cane in, it's wobbly. And if it's wobbly now, you can imagine what it's like come September when it's loaded with tomatoes, and that will be falling all over the place, and then you patch and repair it. So it's much better to invest in a bit of time before you plant them to get a really good support system. And this kind of bamboo scaffolding, I do confess, I quite enjoy doing. It has a sort of utilitarian beauty of its own. Now I should be planting one tomato plant for every cane. And these are quite close together because over the years I've experimented with spacing distances. And I've found that you can grow tomatoes very close together as long as the roots have a certain amount of room in every direction. Okay, that'll do. That will support even the biggest crop of tomatoes I've ever grown. And there will be a lot of tomatoes. There are 62 canes here. And towards that end, I have prepared the soil fairly well. We had salad crops in here until a few days ago, and dug them out and added a lot of compost. I've got two main varieties of tomato. One is San Manzano, which is the great Neapolitan tomato, and this other one, Constelluto Fiorentino, we use for sauces, we use in salads. It's a large tomato, not quite beefsteak, but a good size and really delicious, intense flavour. And that's one of our favourites. So a whole wall of those and a whole wall of San Manzano, and that's our basic stock. But they're all grown in the same way. But let's start with San Manzano. I grew these from seed. I sowed them in January, so it's reached a decent size. Now the crucial thing when you're planting is don't plant back to the same level that it's been in the pot. And that's if you grow it yourself or if you buy a tomato plant. Plant it nice and deep, at least up to the first leaves, and it wouldn't matter if you went right up that deep. And what that'll do is encourage it to grow more roots. And because it's got more roots, it'll feed better, it'll be anchored better, and therefore you'll get a bigger plant with more fruit. So plant tomatoes deep, and that applies whether you're planting them in the soil or in the pot. And it's worth remembering the history of the plant to understand how they like to be grown. They're not Mediterranean plants. Yes, they've become synonymous with the Mediterranean diet, but these come from tropical and subtropical Central and South America, and they like damp heat. And a plant that I always put with them that comes from the same kind of environment, although the other side of the world, is basil, and is another tropical plant. And I've grown, oh, the smell. I tell you, you take the plant out, and this rich, oily smell. Oh, I love it. I love basil. And basil and tomatoes make the perfect combination on the plate. They also make the perfect combination when you grow them. If you're growing tomatoes right, then basil will like it too, and they'll flourish. And what I'm going to do is plant a hedge of basil either side of the path. And it's a pretty good indicator if the basil's happy, then the tomato's happy. Now this structure does need to be really strong. In fact, it's pretty good because the tomatoes I'm putting in here are extra vigorous. Now you can see that this is a very substantial plant. This is a variety called Shirley, but this has been grafted. And what that means is that the Shirley part of the tomato has been attached to a rootstock that's different. And the rootstock is giving it extra vigor, it's giving it earlier fruit, it's making it last a little bit longer, it's making it bigger and slightly hardier. And this is the first year these have been available in garden centres to amateur growers. And the key thing when you're planting grafted tomatoes is not to bury the graft. So whereas I've said bury deeply the seed sown tomatoes, just put them in at the level of the pot. Now I shall have to tie these in as I go. Hence the importance of the structure. And although this structure is handsome in a way, and I like it, it's temporary. However, Carol has gone to Wiltshire in response to a gardening dilemma based upon a permanent structure, a pergola. And the question that she's going along to try and solve is how can it be planted to give you year-round effect?
Irene and her husband have lived here for 4 years. The garden covers almost an acre, but the first thing that greets you at the front of the house is a wonderful cottage garden. I've had a chat with Irene before coming to visit her, and I know that although many aspects of the garden are flourishing, the planting around the pergola isn't. It's very grand, isn't it?
It is really, yes.
Yeah. Was it here when you got here, Irene?
Yes, it was, but it had been neglected for several years. The house had been empty and it was just a mass of greenery at the top, nothing on the uprights at all. So the first thing we did was take it all down and then think, what do we want? And, you know, we see this very much from the house, so we thought it would be nice to have some green on it all year round rather than just looking at a bare structure. As you can see, the ideas were there, but it didn't actually work very well in practice, and it now just looks a bit bitty and needs some new ideas.
With something like this, there are so many different kinds of climbing plants, and what's important is that you have something that's actually going to suit the structure you've got and something that's going to enjoy living there. I mean, this beautiful Clematis montana, it's an absolute picture, but it's not really doing what you want it to do because it's a scrambler. What it wants to do is expand in every direction. And what you're presenting it with is this column, and it just isn't in its nature to do that, really.
No, I can see that. Now, this Clematis armandii I chose because it is evergreen, and I was hoping it would, you know, give us some colour all through the winter, but obviously it's not quite right either.
It's going round and round in circles, isn't it? And to make it look right, you're going to be out here every 5 minutes tying it in and getting it to do what you want it to do. In terms of design, I feel that, you know, you're really going to have to do something fairly radical. And I'm going to suggest that you take everything out and start again.
I'm not surprised. I mean, it does need a total rethink.
If Irene's starting from scratch, then ivy is ideal for this pergola. It's hardy, evergreen, and it climbs incredibly well. Well, they're quite hefty, these, aren't they? I mean, it's a wonderfully sort of various group of plants. You know, you say ivy, and immediately what springs to mind is this sort of thing. No, this is ordinary heterohelix, our native ivy. And whilst it's scrambling around on the ground, it stays like this. But as soon as you introduce it to something it can climb up, it changes its character and it starts to produce flowers and therefore fruit. And it's fabulous for wildlife. But you can vary it too with texture. Look at that one, that's called green ripple.
It's got very different leaves.
It has, do you like that?
Yeah.
Nice texture, isn't it? Or you can go for something that's lighter and brighter, and that's one called glacier. It's just a form of heterohelix, so eventually it will flower too. So what do you think? You persuaded?
I think it could work, yes.
And if they're in pairs, you know, matching pairs right the way down, It'll be dramatic. Shall we have a go at
We can have a
planting
go.
one?
Yeah.
But this soil's lovely.
Good. Well, it's probably prepared quite well for the previous plants, even if they didn't appreciate it.
Yes. Irene's ivies will take some time to establish, but planting annuals alongside them will add some vibrant colour throughout the summer. How about this morning glory? I think this is a, brilliant annual for just clothing that, covering the whole thing with these rich, deep purple flowers in this variety.
Oh, they're lovely, yes.
I mean, you could use all sorts of things. You've got sweet peas. Could even think about using them. I think the important thing is to use the same thing on both sides. You happy with it?
I am, yes. I think it'll look good when it's grown a bit more.
Yeah, well, gardening's all about patience, but also about giving these a drink, do you think?
I think in a year or two that pergola will be clothed in green the year round. Now, if you've got any garden problems or dilemmas that you would like us to come round and try and help you with, write to us, email us, look on our website and you can find the contact details and we'll be very interested to hear from you. Now, Carol there was looking for a solution to a fixture. What I'm doing here now is something that is temporary, seasonal and also fluid. I can shift it around because I want to plant up some pots with wonderful scented Mediterranean plants. Now, this is a very un-Mediterranean garden. It's cold, it's wet, winters can be long and the wind can howl in. But it doesn't mean to say that I'm limited to certain type of plants if I use pots. I can move them around and I can protect them over the winter. And at Malvern, I bought some pelargoniums. And what I particularly want is fragrance. Now, I saw Lady Plymouth at Malvern, not the person, but the plant. I've got her here. Here she is. Doesn't look that remarkable, but if you could smell, you get this rich, slightly citrusy, very exotic fragrance. And the whole point about scented leaf pelargoniums is the slightest touch releases the oils and that releases the scent. And to get the most of the flowers, the roots need to be fairly constricted. So I'm going to put them in a pot. I'm going to put 2 in a pot like this. And I've mixed up a potting compost, which is a general purpose peat-free compost, some grit, and about 1/4 or 1/5 of sieved garden compost. So if I take a terracotta pot like that, now I also have some lavender to pot up. Now, lavender actually is a true Mediterranean plant which comes from right round the Mediterranean area. I mean, this is Munstead and this is a particularly nice example. Now, lavender likes really good drainage. Bright sunshine, poor soil, be as happy as Larry. Now, I've made a separate potting mix for the lavender because I've added extra grit and no garden compost. So it's poorer and much better drainage. And it is important with lavender especially to use a peat-free compost because they like alkalinity. I want to leave some room for water because although they need really good drainage, you can actually kill a lavender with drought. So good drainage, but regular watering. Now I've got Pinata here, And you can see the reason why it's called pinnata is because the leaf shape is pinnate. This comes from the Canary Islands and Madeira. Very beautiful, and it's got this slightly grey, milky texture and these long stems. Right, that's pinnata. And there's a third lavender, and this is stoicus. Lavandera stoicus, and in fact this is a variety called Regal Splendor. And the thing about stoicus is that not only does it have these rabbit's ears at the top that stick out, and they look very distinctive and you get these really rich colours, but also they grow more upright and they will tolerate a little bit of acidity. So if you don't garden on chalk or limestone, but you do have good drainage, this will grow well outside. I don't know if that's in the right positions or not. It feels right. I like the idea of the scented pelargoniums running down the steps, so as you go up and down you get that scent and that mix of fragrances, which is so Mediterranean and so exotic. But maybe it doesn't quite work, but I can move them. That's the whole point of pots. You can move them around. But I do like to group pots together, if for no other reason it makes it easier to water. And if it's easier to water, you're more likely to do it. Because particularly lavender, you can lose them if you forget to water them. But this is a very, very sunny spot, and it will give us our own touch of the Mediterranean. I want to show you one of my favourite things that's been flowering in the garden for the last week before it goes. Rosa moysiae forms a really vigorous thicket. These are 3 plants grouped together. They'll be about 20 foot tall, and it's spangled with these single bright red flowers. And that makes a combination that is both dramatic but also elegant, almost delicate, like a filigree of flower, evenly spaced over it. And that's beautiful, and that lasts for about 10 days. And then when it's over, it forms these incredible hips, the orange waisted flagons that by late summer look just as good as the flowers did in late spring. So you get double the value for your money. Fabulous plant. This garden is a series of enclosed spaces, and although we're surrounded by agricultural landscape, on the whole we close ourselves off from it and just allow views, as much as anything else, to protect from the wind that sweeps across here. But Joe went along to East Sussex to visit a garden that not only embraces the landscape, but draws its design inspiration directly from it.
The Society of Garden Designers is 30 years old this year, and to celebrate, it's teamed up with the RHS and launched Open Gardens, where the general public get an exclusive view of some wonderful gardens created by the country's top designers. This house and garden are nestled in an area of outstanding natural beauty. Garden was completed 18 months ago, with a contemporary sunken area forming the centrepiece of the design. Flowing limestone path seamlessly transforms into a snake-like deck which takes you through to a wildlife pond. From here, borrowed views can be seen of the surrounding landscape. This garden's certainly got a wow factor, and it's a highly designed space, but it still fits in the landscape so comfortably it feels like it's always been here. There's no straight lines, it's all built on curves, and the elements are nice and simple and interlock beautifully together. You know, I'm not sure if this is talking to that, or the landscape's talking to this garden. It's blurring the spaces, and I think that's why it works so well. The garden has been created by Ian Kitson, a designer renowned for his free-flowing organic style, often inspired by the wider surrounding landscape. The trigger of this garden was the extended landscape that you couldn't, you would never want to block out, you'd never want to ignore, you want to embrace it.
Whatever garden design you might come up with here, you will never be able to experience that garden without, at the same time, always experiencing this larger landscape. And of course, people look at landscapes and go, isn't that beautiful? And so, for me, it was then thinking, well, how do I do a garden that kind of shouts back at that landscape and goes, well, actually, look at me, I'm quite beautiful too. And, you know, and kind of just stands up to it. So stands up to that and stands up to that house as well and sits here with a, you know, a kind of good personality.
An identity all of its own.
You got it. That's it. Yeah. The development of the material vocabulary here is very specific to this site. It's, you know, if you travel around this landscape, you know, it's a chalk landscape. You know, you look at the buildings in the village and the roads and how they're put together, and you then look at the house, which is brick and flint. A huge effort has been made with the materials to be very sympathetic to the house, but still try and use the materials that actually say, look, you can use these materials differently.
Let's move on to the water, because that is such a bold design,
classy,
slick pond.
You're right.
With your deck.
There you go. I get no text from Newt saying I'm not happy with the aesthetic language of this pond. It works very well. Yeah. So
it does work very well. Yeah. I love it.
Of course,
the timber's mellowed.
Yeah, and it's part of the design. There is a journey here from coming out of the house, the seating out there, into the sunken garden. You can sit over there, you can sit here. This is kind of, the wall goes down here on, you know, you can, obviously it's lower than this wall. So it's just letting you experience those views more. From the outset, I did feel that a sunken garden here, even though we've had to raise the levels to create a sunken garden, was absolutely the right thing. It's really lovely being in this kind of quite intimate space. You can look there and be looking at this minute detailing of the sempervivens leaf and the flower. And then you turn around and you've got a 5-mile view. And I kind of like that tension.
You play with scale.
I like that.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would change?
Other than me living here and the client not living here.
That'd be good, wouldn't it?
As a garden designer, if this is it, if I have to occupy this garden for the rest of my life, you know, really, I'd be happy. I would be happy.
There's nothing better than visiting a garden when it's at its peak, walking around it, letting it draw you through and experiencing it fully. But as you can imagine, gardens like this don't come cheap. They cost thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. But the great thing about open gardens is that you can visit places like this, you can experience them, and you can take home all that inspiration. This garden will be open for one day only on the 26th of June. But if you can't make it to East Sussex, there are lots of other private sanctuaries around the country that you can visit on the same day, including gardens in Winchcombe, St Neots and Southwark. For more information, go to our website.
The most noticeable thing about that garden for me was that there wasn't a straight line to be seen, whereas of course Longmeadow is dominated by straight lines. Now the inspiration here is simply to grow as many delicious vegetables as possible. The potatoes, Charlotte, are growing nicely. They've got radish in between. They're a little bit small yet, but smelling deliciously of radish, and by thinning them we'll soon be picking those. Rocket, which I've put in between the crop as a catch crop, perfectly ready for harvesting. And just cut them, handful of rocket like that, delicious and fresh. There's no point in being precious about these because the potatoes will soon shade them out, so I want to use them up quickly. We've got Cavolo Nero here, which just snaps off. This is the Tuscan black kale, And the beauty of this is it's fresh and will take lots of cooking, so it's great to add to a soup or stew or a sauce. And by taking a few leaves from each plant, you're encouraging new growth. And at this time of year, you want it to be small. Oh, can you hear the cuckoo? How lovely. We've got shallots, garlic, onions. They're not ready, of course, but the peas are coming on very nicely. This is Kelvton Wonder, an early variety, but this is very early for us. You know, we've still got 10 days of May to go, and the peas are coming through well. Here's a pod. There aren't many full ones like this. You can see baby peas. Oh, that's great. These just have a sweetness you cannot buy, literally can't buy. They're wonderful. But there are enough broad beans to make a meal. This is Express Eleanor, which is a variety I haven't grown before, but it's meant to be particularly early. And we've got nice young pods in here. So if you have a look at this, the beans inside are small. Actually, these are very small, but completely delicious. Now, it doesn't matter if you haven't sown any vegetables at all yet. It's not too late. Whether it be potatoes, broad beans, peas, onions, anything, get them in the ground, particularly salad crops. This is a perfect time of year. So just get on with it and you'll catch up with that cycle and enjoy the harvest. And if you don't grow vegetables, there are still lots of things you can be doing this weekend. If you grow clematis, particularly the late flowering kinds, they're putting a lot of energy into growth before producing flowers. And this growth does need tying in to stop it getting damaged. So carefully untangle the tendrils and tie them in as they grow. If your dahlias are about to come into flower, it'll mean you'll have some large blooms early on in the summer, but not so many later when perhaps you need them more. So pinch out the growing tips, and this will encourage vigorous side shoots, which will carry a mass of flower right into autumn. Now is the perfect moment to lift and divide any clumps of primroses that you have. Dig up your thickest clump and break it up into individual plants. When you replant them, add a little bit of compost to give it a boost and give them enough room to grow away with new vigour. Now this weekend I'll be planting out my courgettes, and I'll do them underneath the wigwams that I'm growing my climbing beans up. There's plenty of muck in a pit under the wigwam, which is great for the climbing beans and also great for courgettes. And the beans won't shade out the courgettes too much and they'll work off each other. As long as I keep them well watered, it's a good system, saves space, looks good. These can go out any time over the next few weeks, but I would hang on a little bit for pumpkins and squashes unless you're in the south of the country, because they really don't like cold nights. Courgettes are a little bit hardier. But just pop those in the ground, and the important thing for courgettes and for beans is to really water them well. Now, don't forget, we shan't be here next week because it's Chelsea, but I'll be back here at Longmeadow in a fortnight's time. See you then. Bye-bye.
Stephen Mangan stars next on BBC Two in a drama from the pen of Douglas Adams. Meet Detective Dirk Gently. Then, if you want opinionated comedy, Make It Frank. Mr. Skinner's covering all sorts tonight at 10.